Okay, so the focus for today, this work fits within, or today's session is number 7 there about monitoring student pace. And this fits within a broader, what we like to call a gestalt, a big picture, which is our quick guide for teaching remotely. So this begins with creating your online classroom, deploying a virtual learning plan, auto grouping based on student need, establishing learning expectations, inspiring virtual collaboration, managing student work, and then lastly, as I said, today's focus, which is monitoring student pace. So with the exception of that first step there, we have already conducted webinars. Some of you have joined us for all of those. Some of you, this might be the first one that you're joining. Again, if you follow us on social media, those are being posted there, and sometime within a few hours of today's session, today's recording will be posted as well. So please visit us there, or on the website you can access those. So again, our focus is on this monitoring pace piece, but in conjunction with this higher level view is what appears on the next slide, which is a self-reflection tool that accompanies this. So you'll notice on the left-hand side there are the 7 steps that we just reviewed. And in the center there, kind of the more colorful one in the background, are each of those we've identified a learning progression for each of these. We've identified some best practices around each one, and then created a learning progression that starts on the left there at the very top, emerging into developing and proficient, and finally advanced. So our partners at Westminster Public Schools have also taken this document and created an interactive version of it, which we do have posted on our website. So if you'd like to take advantage of this, you can access it there. It is a Google Doc that you can click. You can get there from our homepage. So again, empowerlearning.net. If you click on the self-assessment button that exists on the website now, it will take you to a spot to download the Google Doc. It will create a new copy for you, so you can have this interactive and be unique to you. This is not an evaluative tool, but really a tool that we created with an intention of helping teachers, and perhaps in conjunction with administrators, identify what are we doing well right now, and where do we have some opportunities to make some improvements, and where we may currently have some gaps. This is a time where we're making a lot of changes across K-12 education. We recognize that. We recognize how stressful that can be, and we want to provide some assistance around just identifying the things that are most important to be focusing on. Kevin, go ahead and go to the next slide. Actually, if you could back up a couple, I believe I accidentally skipped one. So the webinar series, I mentioned earlier that we are within the context of a larger series of webinars. Today, you'll see down below there is monitoring pace. And then we are also looking at looping back to the first topic there, which was at the very bottom, if that makes sense, but creating your online classroom. So we will make an announcement about that if we end up offering one, and that may be next week. So we'll communicate that out to everyone. So with that said, Kevin, I am going to turn this over to you to dive into the content. So thank you.
Thanks, Sean. And again, if you have any questions, add those to the question tool on the bar on the left, and we'll address those, if possible, at the end of this webinar. Really want to point out, and I know that Sean mentioned this briefly, but this is a quick guide for teaching remotely. If we wanted to include everything and dive into every tool that Empower has and every resource that you can integrate with Empower, take far longer than we have in this webinar series to do that. This is really just to help present to you guys, to the administrators and the teachers who are using Empower, some of the most essential pieces that we think will have the biggest impact as we move forward in this new teaching and learning environment. We have already talked about all these topics on the left, everything with virtual learning plans, auto grouping, inspiring collaboration, managing student work. But today we're going to talk about pace. And this touchstone I keep coming back to when I think about what we need to do as educators is we need to disprove the idea that school's closed. Our school buildings may not be available to students. Those doors may be shut and we aren't gathering together right now. But if we spread this idea that school is closed, it kind of undercuts what our teachers are still doing. So we need to do everything we can to disprove that idea. And today we're going to talk about how we can look at daily progress and students pacing through their own work, as well as the larger picture of pacing through the courses overall. Now, when we're busy and when things are new and different, people are feeling a little stressed out, honestly, this daily progress feels like it's the most urgent piece for us to focus on. And I can totally understand that. If we don't have this solidified with our students, if our students can't figure out how to pace through their work correctly, then all of the work that we put forward in terms of pacing through the courses, that larger picture, kind of comes undone. So although the daily progress and the students interacting with the activities is the part that might feel new to us in this remote environment, we will talk a little bit about course pacing overall. And we've come back to this image in a number of our webinars to really reiterate that school might be quote unquote closed, but learning is still open. Schools, who know it with our buildings, with our face-to-face environments that we've relied on, might not be happening right now, but we can still do a lot of great things for our kids and with our kids in these online learning environments. And we feel that Empower is uniquely positioned to help those schools that are working in our standards-based and competency-based models to really continue education. We need to be aware that as students move to working remotely, they may struggle managing their day-to-day pace. We need to work hard to provide some additional supports to our students. Maybe these were not a strong focus in the past when we were meeting face-to-face and we could communicate on a daily basis with them like this. But as we move to working remotely and the students are learning at a distance, we need to make sure that we're providing to the students the tools so they can understand the status of their work. As they open up your class in Empower, they might see a giant playlist full of activities, things they've been working on all year, things that are finished, things that are partially complete, maybe some things that are missing. And we need to provide them the understanding of the status of all of these activities. If they aren't aware of the simple little icon in the upper right of every activity and all the quizzes, if they don't know which ones signify that they have mastered this, the star, or that is actually marked as missing, or maybe that's something they need to revisit. If they're not aware of what these status indicators mean, then every activity is going to look the same. It's just something that happened in the past and they might start ignoring it. So we want to really make sure that we are sharing information with our students about what these status indicators mean. Now, with that in mind, we do have a few resources available in the Empower knowledge base. If you search the question mark in the lower right-hand corner of Empower, there are a few student videos that have been created with a student focus. One that's a little bit more complete and one is a little bit shorter, aimed more at the younger crowd. We highly recommend that you share those with the students. This gives them a nice, simple walkthrough from their point of view to ensure that they have been trained up in Empower. I know that with my work in Westminster, we spend a lot of time training up our teachers. And in the past, we haven't spent as much time training our students. We assume that they are going to get that directly from their teachers in the classroom. But now that our students are no longer meeting with our teachers face-to-face, we need to be more proactive in training and supporting those students and using the software. And this is just one example. When they're struggling managing their day-to-day pace, we also need to help make sure that our students know what the most important stuff to work on is. We don't want our students sitting down in front of Empower and spending 6 hours a day for every class working through every possible activity in Empower. That's just not the way learning should happen. As your students open up their home pages, they will see their classes. This should look pretty familiar to many of you. And it's important to really focus the students' attention on these two components. The next up. These are the things that Empower is going to auto-suggest based on their position in the playlist and on the students' needs, their academic needs. And it's also going to be based on activities the student or the teacher has pinned. I see teachers relying more and more on pinning activities now that they've moved to this remote teaching to really ensure that those activities the students must focus on rise to the top in this next up section. So that's an important thing to pass on to not only your teachers, but also to your students. Look here in this next up section for what they should work on first. And I know a lot of teachers rely on this missing activity section as well. We have kind of revamped these sections, so we now have multiple sections here with different types of sorting happening. But this missing activities is also an important one for many teachers and for many students. This is stuff that has actively been identified and scored as missing by the teacher. Again, it's another great way for these activities that need specific attention to rise to the top for the students. And honestly, if students are focusing on this next up, and possibly also this missing activities, then they don't have to dig through the entire playlist and find what to work on next. Everything is presented right here for them. Now that manages their day-to-day work. They fire up Empower, they log in, and we can present to them exactly what they should be focusing on today. But they also need to see the bigger picture. All of this work they've done in the past. Yes, they can look at those status indicators and see whether it's an activity they need to work on or not, or how they performed in the past. But sometimes they need to just see, here's a list of all of my scores I've gotten. It's kind of reassuring for many students to see that these activities are getting these scores and this feedback from the teachers. So when they open up their class log, they are going to be able to sort by classes. They can look at overall scores, specific activities, specific standards, if they know there's some weak areas they've been working on. And they can see this running list of all of their work that's happened in this class that has been scored, or as you can see in this example here, maybe it doesn't have a score yet. And that tells them a little bit more about what they might want to focus on as well. I know that teachers in particular, or parents in particular, love this class log. A lot of parents want to just see a list of their work and see where they are in that list and see what should be worked on next. So this feels a little more comfortable to a lot of our parents who might not have ever been in a competency-based system themselves. So those are some of the key essential components that we need to make sure students are trained up on. Like I said, we have those videos that are available in our knowledge base. But I personally also recommend that teachers reach out to their students. They might want to present that in a face-to-face virtual meeting. They might want to create their own little walkthroughs explaining exactly what their students should be doing. And they can model those based off the videos we've created, but sometimes having a voice that is familiar to the students or a face that's connected to it, sometimes it means a little bit more to the students. That's something that you might want to consider as well, creating some own resources for your learners. Now, if we can be of any help with that, let us know. We actually have talked recently about putting together possibly a folder full of screenshots and images that you can use to help create your own resources internally. And we will obviously post that and share that information when we have that stuff available for you. So the next thing we need to look at in terms of pacing through our work and our progress is what we should be measuring at the school level. There's been a lot of discussion online everywhere about attendance. How do we do attendance? And I think it's important to be mindful of that. You know, the attendance and engagement, that's an important thing to measure. But if we lose sight of the fact that our teachers still need to continue to assess the students' learning through their activities and help build these bodies of evidence that create a full picture of the students' summative scores, then we're kind of giving up the fight. If we ignore the learning that's happened in the past, if we throw the baby out with the bathwater here, and if we don't continue to focus on high quality assessment and high quality feedback to the students, then all the other work we do doesn't have as much purpose. So please make sure that your teachers continue to score things. Make sure that they are being mindful of the work that they are giving students, that it is a true reflection of proficiency connected to the standards. But if we're looking for other things to measure, it's clearly a different environment these days for many of us. And if we are looking to measure that attendance, if we're looking to measure engagement, measure learning, what is it that is important for us in a school, and how can we do all of that within Empower? Now, obviously, measuring the learning, like we just showed in the other slide, if we are assessing correctly and building those bodies of evidence, we continue to measure learning as we always have. It's those other two pieces that are a little bit different now. We know when we're sitting face-to-face with students, if a student has their head on their desk and they're sleeping, they are obviously not engaged with what's going on in class. But how do we measure that in a virtual environment? And then other people are talking about attendance. How do we measure whether a student attended class? And the bigger question, I believe, is that even important? We've always talked about getting rid of seat time. It'd be this wonderful idea if we could get rid of seat time and truly just measure the things that are important. Well, now we're in a unique position where that has kind of been done for us. We've worked hard to quickly fast track a new report. It's come out faster than any report I've ever seen come out. And it's called the Student Accountability Report. If it is not live on your site now, we hope to have it live on sites shortly. We are in the final testing right now. I know that I'm running this every day with some Westminster data to ensure it's exactly what we need. When this is available, we will obviously reach out to people and we can follow up with some questions and help get you running with this Student Accountability Report. But I want to show you what this is actually going to do for you. When you run the Student Accountability Report, if you run it for a school with a few hundred people, you're going to get a lot of data. You'll get a different row for every kid, for every class or group that they are connected to. Now, some of these classes and groups might not actually be used. Maybe you have some classes synced and you only use the groups. Well, the classes are still going to come through for you. But that'll just be data that you can ignore. And what we see here is we have information about the school. We have the student name, the grade, the teacher of the class or group, as well as the name of the class or group. We then report on the number of total logins to Empower for this student, the number of activities accessed. This would be activities they have actually clicked and opened for this class. The number of evidences they've submitted. So this is work that they have uploaded in conjunction with an activity that's related to this class. The number of submitted quizzes for that class, and the number of messages posted. Now, this, we felt, gives us a pretty good view of not only their academic engagement, but also their social engagement. And that's a little bit different than what we might have measured in the past when we looked at straight up attendance. They walked into my class, they sat down, and they left when the bell rang. We know that doesn't tell us much other than that they were in the room with us. But if we actually can look at this academic engagement data and the social engagement data, we can start to get a better picture of how the student has been working. We don't feel it's our place as a company and as a support partner to actually tell you yes or no, you should mark them as attended based on this data. We feel what we can do best is provide this data to you, and then locally, you can work within the restrictions you might have, the requirements you might need to follow. I know in Westminster, we're lucky enough in the state that we do not need to worry about measuring and reporting attendance for the remainder of the year. And with that, we can kind of pivot and start to look at this more holistic view and start to build a model of what does an engaged student look like online? Do we have the perfect answer yet? No, this is new to us as well, even in Westminster. But we are working with this data to try to find trends and patterns and figure out where the red flags are in this data. Obviously, if you look at somebody like J. Doe down here at the bottom, this would be a red flag. This would be an indication that something is going on. It could be an indication that the student is not engaged and does not want to work, or it could be an indication that the student's basic needs might not be met at home. Maybe they aren't feeling secure and safe. Maybe they just don't have access to Wi-Fi at their house. Whatever it is, we can't, just like with missing work does not indicate the student cannot perform. It just means that work is missing. But this will present to us as schools in Westminster, and I believe at your locations as well, with some great data to track down those red flags and to find that data to follow up on, as well as to celebrate the successes in your schools and in your districts. So again, this student accountability report is being finalized right now. I know that that's on my schedule today to run some more reports and dig in and slice and dice this data to make sure it's all ready to go for you guys, and we will have it out to you guys as soon as possible. Now, you might be aware that within Empower, we can show you some pretty cool, there's some pretty cool features that can happen automatically. One of them that I love is this automatic course pacing. And this is really the next level up. We've talked about, how students can find their appropriate work to work on and pace their days and through that content. Now we talked about engagement and how we can ensure that students are engaged and working as at the higher school level. And this is even higher still. How do these kids know that they are doing well in a course? What single metric can we provide to them? Well, Empower, if you have it set up in certain ways, can tell you automatically, based on what the teachers have entered for their evidences and for their overall scores for the standards, it can tell you every single day whether a kid is on pace, ahead of pace, or behind pace for each one of their classes. Now, this, along with showing their pacing for graduation, are they on pace to graduate on time? Even if they're down in third grade, we can start calculating that data in Empower. It's a little complicated for people. And if you haven't set this up yet, I don't recommend necessarily bringing this on board right now. We've got more on our plates to deal with. So what we recommend bringing on board now to deal with the situation we're in is not the automatic pacing. Honestly, let's talk about this for next year for you guys. But now we should really take a look at this manual pacing. The way that this happens is this: the teachers open up the report card comment tool within Empower. They find the drop down for the pace for every individual student. When they select one of these paces here, that will automatically populate the pacing indicator on their home page. So as long as the teachers have gone into their classes, they can mark who's on pace, behind pace, ahead of pace, based on what the teacher knows about the student and how they've been working. This is going to be the easiest way to bring pacing on board now. If you haven't brought pacing on board before, you might want to consider doing it, because this is a great way to give additional feedback to the parents and students that things are going well, or that they might need to pick it up a little bit. Now, this pace can be revisited through this screen as often as a teacher wants. They could, if they have the time and the inclination, get in here daily and adjust paces for students. Probably not going to happen daily. But maybe teachers are going to get in here once a week and update at the end of the week how the students worked throughout the week. And this will give a great piece of feedback on pacing, again, to the students and the parents, who will both see this when they log in. If the teachers don't update this pace in here, if they set it once, that pace will remain as the pace that shows for the students throughout the remainder of the marking period. And sometimes it's nice for the teachers to be able to see all of these paces for these students. I know that a lot of our counselors, our social workers, our interventionists in our district are using this feature a lot here. They will, pretty much any place you see a student's icon, clicking on that will bring up a drop-down menu. Right from there, if you choose their homepage, it will open up a view of the student's homepage. And from there, our interventionists can scroll through and see the pace for every single class. They can obviously dig into the class log and get more detail that way. But if nothing else, just seeing those classes that the student might be struggling in is a great point where they can start having a conversation with the student and his parents to see what kind of additional supports and needs that we can maybe help meet. So again, this is any teacher, any user, staff or teacher user in Power, clicking on one of the student icons, homepage takes you directly to their page to see all of this. And we try to point this out as often as possible. It's one of those things that sometimes gets overlooked. In the lower right-hand corner of Empower, you should have a little question mark. It might look a little bit smaller than this. We have some different versions out there. Clicking that question mark will bring up the our knowledge base portal. You can see popular articles, the recent things that we've added, as well as the search field here. I know if you type in student and you start typing student into the search field, the student-focused videos that I mentioned earlier will pop up. A number of the resources, if you want to look more at pacing, there's going to be some resources about pacing in here as well. If your teachers just need to know how to make an activity, they've really maybe dropped the ball on that and haven't really gotten around to it in the past, and they need some additional supports, they can do the same thing. Anything they type into the search field will bring up as many resources as we have available. And if there's nothing there and you need some resources, let us know. We're always looking for more things to add, whether it's to add to our FAQs in there or to create some more videos, some handouts, some additional supports. We will add these here as quickly as possible. So let us know what we can do and can provide for you there. That's the end of my portion of the webinar here today. I know that we have some questions, I believe. I haven't really been watching that as I've been talking, but Sean, do we have some questions and some additional things that we want to cover here?
Yep, we do. We have received some, and I am monitoring these live. So if anything that Kevin has presented today has sparked some wonderings for you, please submit those and I will take them live. But I do have some that we're going to go over here. So first one is, so Kevin, is there a place to learn more about pacing calculations?
There is, and that is one of the, we have that linked in our knowledge base. If you look at pacing calculations, it gets pretty in-depth, and I can really geek out on this a lot. One of the things that we have built is a Google Sheet. And in that Google Sheet, it is a model where it kind of pulls everything, it pulls the curtain back and it shows you all the calculations that happen behind the scenes. If you actually search pacing into the knowledge base, you will find that resource there. And it will allow you to go in and enter some fake scores for standards, enter a start date and end date for the course. And you can see how much of the course has passed will determine whether or not the student is on pace in conjunction with those scores that they have.
Great, thank you. Let's see. So our student homepage doesn't look like yours. Maybe it's an older version. What should we do?
Yeah, those images that I showed there, obviously those are with our most recent version of the homepage. If you are seeing something that looks a little different, get in touch with us and we'll take a look at what version you have installed. There are some schools that have decided not to necessarily update to the most recent version for various reasons, but we'll definitely work with you to make sure that if you don't see all of the things that we shared there, whether or not it's intentional, and then we can update you if you guys need as well. Sean, I've got the that pacing model here. I just pulled this up here, just so that when people pull it up, it looks like it's a whole lot. We've got some directions up top explaining how this works. But really, this model, you fill in scores in any of the yellow columns. You can adjust the start date and end dates for the class. This is kind of a fake class with 15 standards in it. And then based on what the students' scores are, Well, there we go. Just removing 2 scores from the student there would change the student to being behind pace. So you can really start to see how it's all of the scores that a student has would affect a student's pace. It's not just the proficient scores.
All right, good. Thanks for showing that. Helps make things very concrete.
Yeah, and that is a complicated thing for many people because a lot of it just happens behind the scenes. And then once you start to see the math and see how it's all of the student scores together make up their pace, not just the finished proficient standards, then it starts to make a little bit more sense.
Okay. So a couple of questions coming in. This person had to join a little bit late, but the question is, did you say that the accountability report is a new tool coming soon, or is it already accessible?
It is coming soon. I know that we have worked with Empower from my Westminster side of my job. We've worked with Empower to get that loaded and to help develop that. And we're testing that right now in Westminster. I will be testing it more today. That'll be one of my primary things I'm working on for the remainder of my day here. And we hope to have that totally finalized and ready to roll out to you guys as soon as possible. I would love to see us loading that on your sites here this week. And I will do what I can to make that happen. But it will be coming soon.
And Kevin, just to add to that, and you may have mentioned this already, but once that is accessible, you can plug in dates to go retroactive. So even if this tool comes out next week, you can apply what student activity or any activity that's occurring right now retroactively to that. So you'll be able to apply that report.
Absolutely. And you can run it for a single day. You can run it for a week, and it's going to be whatever makes sense for you guys there. And Sean, I did want to point out there is one piece of data that is not retroactive. It was one that we were never bothering. We had no reason to collect in the past, but I believe it will be collected up to about a week ago is when we started collecting that data. And that is the activities accessed. That's the one piece of data that might not be completely retroactive. Everything else, activities, quizzes, messages, all of that stuff will be completely retroactive all the way back to whenever they want.
All right, thank you. Switching topics here. Here's a question. Can you base the pacing on lessons finished instead of standards?
No, not that I can think of right off the top of my head. And I will usually answer something quickly, and then I will think about well, there might be a creative way to do that. I do know that there are some reports that might be useful for teachers to share with students. But in terms of the actual pacing indicator, we don't have a way to automate that based on what was assigned this week. And I think one of the reasons is that at its core, Empower is based around the idea that students, that time is the variable, and students aren't necessarily all held to the exact same requirements as every other student in the class, and they could be in different places. And I think that is one of the reasons why it is based more on the actual learning and the demonstration of their knowledge rather than the completion of those activities. It is totally possible, though, for especially in these times when things are a little different and we're honestly keeping our head above water some days, both on the student and the teacher side of things. It is totally possible for teachers to look and see how the students are completing their activities and then manually set that pace to reflect that. Just be sure that however you decide to do that, that they're real clear and there's consistency across the teachers that that is what the pacing is reflecting for you guys now.
Good. Okay, we have time for a couple of other questions. So next one is, can parents get alerts when their student falls behind pace?
Do you mean like an email alert? You think that's what they're talking about?
I would suspect so.
Okay. We don't send out email alerts for pacing. We do have the ability to turn on a feature that would email parents when work is marked missing. That is something that if you don't have that turned on now, that's something you could consider here in the future. And that would send a weekly digest of all of their work for all of their classes on missing work. But honestly, that is something that you might want to think about right now. How do we approach missing work in our district, in our schools? I know in Westminster, we have decided to suspend those missing work emails, and we have decided to not score any work missing. And that goes back to the you only want to score something missing if you are sure the student had the ability to complete it and they didn't. And these days we can't verify that every student has all their needs met and are able to work on our schoolwork. But in terms of emails about pacing falling behind, no, that is an interesting idea. And I imagine that's something we'll think about and look at implementing, though.
Okay, we have one last question, Kevin. Our report card comment tool doesn't have a pace dropdown. How do we turn that on?
Shoot us a message in the help desk, and then we will turn that on. There are a number of fields and dropdowns and various tools in Empower that exist. If we automatically turned every single thing on for everybody, it might be a little overwhelming, and some of them would have no relevance to how you run things there. So just let us know, and we will get that switch flipped for you guys and have that available.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kevin. That is all the questions that we received. However, if something has come up, our next slide will have my contact info, Sean Duncan. And please feel free to send those to me. People have done that after prior webinars, and we've worked to get answers to their questions. So we thank you for joining us this afternoon. And maybe most of all, a real heartfelt thank you for all of you educators out there who are just in the middle of making the best of a tough situation. We hope that the tools that we're creating on our end are providing some guidance and some help to you, make your jobs a little bit easier. And if there is something that, Kevin said earlier, if there's a resource that you're not seeing in the knowledge base, please reach out to us. We can maybe direct you to something that already exists, or if there is something that does not currently exist, we can look at creating something for you and get that in your hands. So my contact info is there, my email address and my phone number. You can also reach me through our website, empowerlearning.net, and connect with us that way. So with that said, thank you so much for joining us today, and we wish everyone a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.